Dude, I
Happy
need
Wednesday,
to dress
man.
up more often. Yeah, happy Wednesday. Happy Wednesday.
I got my hair cut for you.
I was gonna say this looks good. I wish I'm gonna grow some hair out if I can.
Man. You should.
By the way, as I'm discovering my own collection, some Japanese whiskey this time, Nikka
Nice.
whiskey.
You've got the
I've
best.
never tried it before, but tonight
Yeah,
is the
you've
night.
got the best thing. Is Japanese are the Japanese known for their whiskey?
Apparently, but I'll let you know how it is in a few.
I think they're known for drinking it. I'm going for the I'm going for the Americana.
How has your week been so far? It's
Mad. I think we're running into the year end. I think how many days do you have left? We have like 10 days left. We're trying to close our round. We just found out we're part of the Deloitte fastest growing 50 companies event.
Congrats.
Loads of stuff.
I don't know. I mean, we're obviously we're actually going to try to disconnect, even though Marina and I always talk about like now that we're part of the same company, right? Like, how do we really disconnect and at such early stages? But one thing we do know,
Right.
and we had this discussion, like we need our mental health breaks, right? Like it's
Right.
so for us, it's every morning now we go from 9:30 to 11:30. We're taking Spanish lessons, right? So
How's the Spanish?
I'm not practicing on you yet. Not yet. I need to get my comfort. ¿Qué tal?
Yeah, nice. That's a dream of mine, though. What a gift to be able to learn a language like later on, like because you're going to be immersed in it. Like what a gift,
right?
Because you grew up by.
Sorry, man. I'm just like we're things are happening still. It's crazy. It's 8 p.m. here, 7 p.m. there.
Yeah.
But
yes. So we've got a slick dressing person up for this series. I've heard.
I was gonna say, what do we run out of shit to talk about?
Close. I think we pushed it.
I don't know if that's actually really possible or not, but yeah. Yeah, so the funny thing is, I think we've rescheduled with him a couple of times because he had a big announcement, which I'm actually was pretty excited when it did come out. Just given my some of my short-lived pharma background, but we're gonna let him in, and it is
as he's coming in.
Kalali.
As he's coming in, I was just talking to our mutual friend, Lisa Swonen, and she was wondering about podcasting in general.
It's her birthday.
It's her birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Lisa. That's right.
We just saw her. And she was saying, when Jim, Joyce, and Eugene start a podcast, it's the end of the podcast. Boom.
Amir, are you with us?
I am. How's everyone doing?
Good. Hey. We were like, all right. I was just saying to Jim that we had to reschedule a number of times, right? And given the fact that we are meticulously unproduced, this took a lot of producing on at least my part on scheduling, but it was worth waiting for.
I'll take all the blame for that. And I've certainly enjoyed watching. Is it series 4 now? Is that right? Is that where we are?
Season 4.
Yeah.
Who would have thunk?
So we certainly a lot of mutual friends I've really enjoyed watching your conversations with them, and I thought being unproduced was phenomenal. I think the fault has been mine that there's been lots of new things going on which I couldn't talk about, and I kept telling Eugene, you know what, I'd love to talk about it, but how about we do it a little later because this new thing's coming, and so that's kind of delayed us a bit, right?
Did you guys ever meet, by the way, anywhere in the pharma space?
Yeah, totally. Jim was running naked through a pub in San Francisco, right, during JP Morgan. I clearly remember that.
Right. You got to do what you got to do when you're trying to raise capital. You got to do what you got to do.
I don't think Jim and I purposefully met. I would not be surprised or shocked that we were in the same room somewhere, especially during JP Morgan. But I will tell you, Jim, once we are able to see each other, I will tell you a very, very funny story about exploits in Dublin that you would enjoy. Yeah.
But let's hold off because we're now a few minutes into the discussion. We still don't know our viewers and listeners, the thousands and thousands, who you are. So give us a little bit of your background because you have a funny accent.
I do, absolutely. So first of all, I would like to pretend I dressed up for you. I will tell you, I've got a few TV interviews today, so I would have been much more casual to match you guys today, but I really didn't think I should change clothes 6 times today. So you're getting the formal, jacket. I'm sorry about that.
So from the shout of digital health to CBS.
Yeah. So I decided I'll just wear, something that will suit everyone. Normally, I would have had a very casual demeanor for you guys to match you. So I apologize for the formal jacket.
I got my hair cut for you, and I put on a coat.
I was supposed to have a haircut today, but for reasons we won't mention, they had to be cancelled yesterday. So yes, I'm without the haircut. You look very, very nice, Jim. I've got to say, you're looking. Maybe it almost feels like you were in a board meeting or something today. So. So to answer your question, Eugene, I do have a funny accent. So I did grow up actually in Switzerland and in boarding school, and then UK boarding school in England. Then had a lot of Australian girlfriends that tend to change my accent a little bit too towards the Australian.
And you had to balance out the boarding schools with an Australian girlfriend.
Yes, there are quite a few stories during those 2 games.
Is that how you met Milind? Is that the Australian connection?
No, actually, no. Milind, yes, no. He wasn't my secret girlfriend, no. He was but, growing up in London, really bumping into Australians is quite, an easy thing to do. So then I moved to California as an academic. So my medical school was in London, which was great fun. And then moved to California for the weather, clearly. And been there since in Southern California, and been there in drug development for about 20 years, mainly doing 30 to 40 countries a year, till 2020. So yes, that's sort of the background.
So dive a little deeper, because when I first heard about you, and I think we met actually in San Diego, I heard Amir is in like the bleeding edge of R&D pharma. So can you give us a little bit more? Yeah.
So, I worked for a very, very large company for a long time. And this was the largest company of its type that did clinical trials all over the world, very global. So during those 20 years, really spent a lot of time developing the infrastructure around the world of clinical trials, in countries that maybe most US folks wouldn't be able to identify on the map, Kazakhstan or somewhere. So, offices everywhere, how to run clinical trials globally, and, at scale. So any one time I may have, 300 programs, under my group running them. So very, very busy, and really learning. It's like dog years. You're running so many programs at once. You really take learnings from one to another. So, making lots of new friends around the world, and really knowing where the best restaurants are everywhere but San Diego, where I live. So I can tell you about, pretty much every city in the world except where I live, because I don't get out much from home.
Jim, I guess before I left also the big company, I was traveling quite a bit, and once in a while I would get like a Twitter DM, hey, check out this restaurant in this location, and these like odd locations that I was at.
Well, actually, what was funny? I literally had, about 100 people that used to message me saying, we're going to, let's say, Barcelona, where you are, Eugene. Where should I stay and where should I eat? And I think it was funny, they thought I had the time to be the personal concierge for literally 100 people. I did my best to do that, but still now, if you ask me, I can tell you what is the best seat on every plane type, around the world, what I think are the best hotels, in Barcelona, etc. So I'm kind of still got that knowledge. I haven't quite lost it yet, but if this goes on too much longer, I may.
So how are you coping? So you're pretty locked down in California right now then? And
yes.
You must have loved it secretly. Like, people complain about traveling, but like some people just love it. You must have liked it.
So two things. I never complained about traveling. So other people said to me, you travel more than anyone else I know. It must be horrible. How can you do it? And I used to just think, wait, you're traveling first in business class around the world in lovely hotels, and the real workers are really working hard in really quite tough jobs. How could you possibly complain? It just wouldn't even occur to me to complain about the travel, because clearly it was nice travel, and I'm known for my ability to hack travel. So that's actually my other specialty. We could do a whole podcast series on, how to travel once we can. And I've done them before.
Amir, I'm in. I'm like spreading my media empire. So,
well, so to tease you, the next time we meet, My favorite story before the lockdown was I managed to get an FBI upgrade on an aeroplane. Actually, it wasn't even an upgrade. It was actually more than that. But we can talk about that another time. But I'm specializing in very interesting ways of.
Wait. You can't like give us like 30-second FBI upgrade. You can't just leave it alone like that.
All I can say is, no, really, it's a really good story, but it'll take the whole podcast. So I'm not sure.
It's funny. I managed to get an upgrade coming back from JP Morgan, and I was coming into the queue flying San Fran back to Dublin. Yeah. And I'm with Martin Kelly, our sponsor here. And we kept walking up, and we know there's one upgrade left on the Aer Lingus flight going back. Yeah. And so I come walking in, we're rushing to the front of the queue, and I look over and I'm saying, listen, I've been traveling in with this guy, and I'm not sure he packed his own bags.
Yes, no. So it's funny you should say that. So I would say that all my activities are ethical when it comes to travel hacking. This is the one where it was completely.
He just called you unethical, Jim. No.
But what I would say is it's similar in the sense that it wasn't really. That's why I said it wasn't really an upgrade, because luckily for me, I don't really need to upgrade to anything, right? So I don't really travel coach. But the issue was there was a cancellation of a flight. There was no seats left on any alternative flight. And despite being the highest level on all the alliances, so all three, I still am the highest level, that still didn't cut it because there were no seats. So the story really is how to obtain a seat when there is no seat. So it's more than an upgrade, but it did involve some shenanigans. So yes, so we can talk about that later, definitely.
But it's funny Jim brought up JPM, right? Because I'm actually kind of
wait, I brought it up talking about him running naked through JPM.
True. You get all the credit.
I just want to say that phrasing again, just to embarrass him a bit more. That's all.
Right. Thanks.
So JPM, I to be honest, I don't even know what's happening. I know there's like a lot of activities, but I have no idea. Like I know, for example, Startup Health, which was always the digital health sideshow from JPM.
Great show,
they're still gonna have something. I know. I think Marina is presenting as a transformer, but I have no idea what else is going on or why it's even.
It's funny you should say that. I've had about 20 emails ask me that very question, saying, "Can you tell us what's going on?" As if I'm the mayor of San Francisco or something. I know. What I will tell you is, I did see a really funny tweet yesterday. Where I wish I'd done it, thought of it. It said, "JP Morgan 2021, all the work, none of the parties." Which pretty much summed up 2020, really.
Right, like I went to an awards event, and I'll leave it out of it. I went to an awards event, and they put us all the people getting the award into a Zoom room. They managed to bottle all the worst parts of an awards event into a Zoom call, and then and extract all the possible joy and fun out of it. And then at the end of it, you sat there. We didn't win the award, and they blocked you out of the meeting like in 2 seconds. It was just a disaster.
I actually hope one of the organizers is listening for feedback, because I'm sure that they will be able to tell what it is.
So Amir, we got to talk about you because you got boarding school, we got Australian girlfriends, we got moving for weather. You did your medical degree, and then you joined, and you're allowed to say the alma mater of the company you were in for years.
Oh, I think everyone knows it's the largest company in clinical research.
Yeah. So then you were running 300 projects, you were hacking travel, you're giving Barcelona eating tips. And so that's where you left our list.
Sure. So then I think one of the things I'm known for are my hobbies. So although I have day jobs, I tend to have a lot of hobbies, and many of them involve bringing people together. So in terms of life sciences, and I've done others, by the way, one of the more interesting ones I want to talk about, I'm also one of the founders of the biohacking village at DEF CON, which is a whole other story. And I think, yeah. And I mean, it's actually very topical because this week we know we've had hacks of the US government by, allegedly Russian people. But that's been really interesting. And I did that mainly to really keep an eye on things like synthetic biology and other things that will really affect drug development. But in terms of kind of my mainstream work, it really goes back to 18 years ago, where I really felt pharma was not collaborating the way they should or talking to each other. In fact, I used to tell a joke that wasn't really funny or a joke, that if you were at an academic meeting 20 years ago, if two pharma people were talking to each other, one was interviewing for a job. They really did not talk to each other about what they were doing. Everything was considered a secret, despite the fact that most things weren't, and we should really collaborate. And here I was running most of the programs for them, right? And understanding what's going on and thinking you need to learn from each other. So that was really the catalyst for me as a physician, thinking if patients realized how little we collaborated where we should be, they would not be happy. So it's really, for me, an important thing to bring together forums. So I did my first one 18 years ago. It's still going on its 19th year. It brings together companies who, discuss issues that we could collaborate on the science side, and then compete on the molecule and things that are appropriate that way, but really not waste money redoing everything someone else has done. Right? Because if we know, why would we waste that? And if we know, let's tell your competitor actually that this pathway is not good, because we only have so many research dollars. We shouldn't waste it by redoing it in small pockets. So that's been a big driver.
Do you think that's happened? Has that happened in the last year? I mean, with us getting these vaccines produced in such a time?
Sure. So Laura Pure will definitely say that the 2020 has forced that on companies. To give people credit, we have actually been trying to do that for about 20 years. I think some companies are more collaborative than others, some space. I would tell you that, people definitely, instead of seeing the light, they feel the heat. I think where we've seen the most collaboration is where people realize they absolutely cannot do it on their own. So if you look at, for instance, I'll take my own area of neuroscience. If you think of things like ADNI, which was like an imaging consortium around Alzheimer's, there's no way any one company right now can solve some of the methodological issues that we face in Alzheimer's. There's just no way. We have to collaborate and pool resources. No, even the biggest companies cannot do that. So I think those are areas that really seem obvious that one has to. And I think that's happened. Now, can we go beyond that and really collaborate in areas that are not so painful? That's the question.
Jacob Laporte from Novartis, talked about, the digital on-ramps into Novartis and trying to do with, the Biome, the Novartis Biome project.
Yes.
And he said something really interesting. I hadn't heard a pharma executive say this before, that talked about there's so many aspects in digital health technology that you're fundamentally building platforms, or you're building stuff that should be shared, multi-pharma perspective on a technology. Like one company, with one drug in a space has a clever digital health tool, should be collaborating with the three others. I haven't heard that a lot.
Well, if I take that analogy further, if you think about, let's say, outcome measures, you really cannot go to the FDA, say, I've come up with this outcome measure just for my company, my drug. And so it's much more powerful to go to the FDA. And we've done this many times over the years with a consortium of companies that work together to develop an outcome measure validated across different data sets. The FDA then is much more likely to say yes to that than just one company going and saying, this is the way. I'll give you an example, okay? Many, many years ago, we were looking on really standardizing how we assess depression in clinical trials. And at the time, every company had their own way of training people how to do the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale. And what was crazy about it was they all thought that, the investigators, the physicians who see the patient will go home, and then in the morning they have, 12 patients in clinical trials, and one might be company A, one might be company B, and they're going to say, what did this company tell me a year ago on exactly how to rate this item? Let's do that because it's the patients for that company. Or my next patient is, the way company B. That's just not going to happen. So the idea that you can tell people that only your way for your thing is not particularly, practical. So I think there's many examples where, as you mentioned, and I think what Jacob said is absolutely true, that the more something is really used by others actually strengthens it, and we need to do that.
What struck me, and I think, Amir, we met under the context of the CNS Summit, right?
Sure.
Which, there's a lot of, honestly, crap conferences out there, and very much focused, even if some say they're nonprofit, they're selling every pixel, every inch / every room. Yeah. And I remember some of the early discussions, like actually in San Diego, when we met, I just even remember your approach. Like, it wasn't about, a sponsorship for conference. It's like, what value can you provide to the community of the CNS? And unfortunately, I still to this day regret I haven't been able to come. So I've been always watching it from afar.
Yes, that's fun.
to me, that was the aspect of like cooperation and collaboration in the pharma industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me say a few things about it. I mean, for instance, recently you had my good friend Jane Metcalfe, obviously, on the
That's right.
podcast. Love Jane. She actually was one of our hosts this year. We actually were one of the very few meetings that actually built a real stage, got COVID tested, and we actually did not with no audience, but we actually did do a physical meeting just that people could kind of have that feeling that it's not just a Zoom, right? And Jane was very kind enough to fly down and do all that. There was a lot of prep involved to do that. So what's interesting is Jane doesn't go to your average life science, pharma conference at all. In fact, none of them, right? So why is Jane there? Why is my career there? Why were some hackers there? Lots of really interesting people. And I think with Summit, because there was a couple of principles. I started it honestly in a way as being frustrated with meetings. So the way I look at it is, if something doesn't exist, I just create it. If I'm not happy with the status quo, I don't bitch about it, just like I didn't bitch about traveling at the time. I just do something about it. And my frustration was, I looked at life science meetings, and this is no different to any area, quite frankly, is there was a spectrum. There's a spectrum of academic meetings, which are very appropriate. I sit on the board of many of those. They are there to, push science forward and think about the etiology of disease, and very important what they do. Their primary concern is not drug development. So they're not trying to solve drug, nor should they solve drug developers' problems, right? Then you have a whole range of what you mentioned, commercial meetings, where, some of them are very large entities that run 600 meetings a year. One day is fashion, next day is nuclear power stations, and next day is life sciences. And they don't, and some of them on purpose, do not have any domain expertise whatsoever, right? And their only goal is profitability. I have nothing against that. I think that it's like any other business, good luck to them. But to me, they're not really achieving anything if really their main focus is how do I put more bums on seats and make more money? And I'll take anyone's money who's willing to pay me, right? So with Summit, we thought, well, why can't we have the best of all worlds, which is academic rigor, so we cannot buy your way into the keynote. You cannot pay to play. As far as I'm concerned, I go to some meetings that charge me. I go to all these meetings, even if I don't like them, just to see, what they're like. There's quite a few now that charge you $5,000 at the high end, right? And then everything on stage is paid for play. Clearly, I mean, it's very clear that whoever's on stage is paid. And your dinner is some famous company. While you're having your dinner, you already paid $5,000 for this conference. Your dinner,
right. They're selling you something
for 45 minutes. And without irony, because some of them you've got lots of things that could have humility about, selling you something during your dinner. And I've actually said to the organizers, I said, that's just greedy. You can't charge $5,000 and advertise, right? It's just not a good. It's not a sustainable model to me. To me, if you're a life science leader, you can get this advertising at home for free. Why would you pay to go to something? And that is a very unusual approach, because it's not a profitable approach, right? If you're maximizing profit, you cannot have that model. It just is not possible. So the only way you can do it is to understand that this is not profit is not your motive. Your motive is do the right
content
thing,
first.
Have the content right, have very high standards about that. And then people hopefully will understand that and support you. And I think that's how Summit started.
Isn't it the time though? Isn't it now the time of think about it's authenticity, it's about purpose, like all these businesses that are really crushing it. Like we had Lee Shapiro on, and he talked about, the fundamental story, of Glenn Tolman's son that drove the creation and the obsession with creating a great product with Livongo, and how, and they were they're going to be down in history as the most profitable venture of all times in terms of creating something and bringing it all the way through. So isn't it the time where now it's just not in conflict anymore? Like people thought it was in conflict, but it's actually not in conflict.
I think the time has been always. I think that so it's always been right to do that. The one challenge we have is, just like everything else we're facing this year, there's also fake authenticity. So if something is successful, then there's going to be a bunch of people, faking it and saying,
Right.
So
like Eugene and I, we truly are unproduced.
Yes, yes.
That's what they all say, though.
and that we believe. But here's the thing, though: you're authentically unproduced. I would not be shocked if let's say you hit the Josh Rogan levels that Eugene's aiming for, right? Let's say you do that. There will be people who will be highly produced claiming to be unproduced. They will be, right?
100%.
Hey, when somebody's copying us.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what you want to go. I know you guys did a little call before.
Well, we had a catch up because I'm always interested.
I broke out this earlier, so.
Right,
it's very early in the morning here, so I will tell you, I've got a choice. I can have non-alcoholic, okay, or I can have alcoholic. I haven't decided if it's early enough yet.
What do you got there? Because
I got the
Japanese.
There you go. Oh, there you go. We're matching. That's fantastic.
You're officially on Dublin, Barcelona time, so you're allowed.
Okay, perfect. I can move from the ginger ale to the whiskey. Okay.
But we have to cover the subject. I didn't tell Eugene this beforehand, but the subject that I want to cover was the psychology of a good pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Wait. Before you go into that, I'm sorry. I just have to back to JPM where you were running around naked.
Yes. Yeah, Jim, you're never going to live that down. That you're going to believe it.
So I think this was actually at Michelle's Medable party.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
I introduced you to my better half, Marina, and your first comment, I think right after, something like nice shoes, and you even knew the designer, which I kind of looked at you and I was like, how do you know a designer, shoe designer? So, sorry, I wanted to set the context a little bit on that.
100%.
I pride myself in knowing a little about everything as much. So I'm a curious person. So I pretty much can give you a 30-minute dissertation on pretty much any topic, just enough to be dangerous. So shoes is one of those. Yes, there's especially women's. I will tell you that one time I was okay. I'll go completely off topic, which will become farmer in a second. There's a funny story about Europe. So I was in Istanbul once, and normally I'm the person who's always been there 10 times before, and I'm the sort of the tour guide. So we had a bunch of people who were coming to that meeting, and one of them I knew, was very fashionable, and I sent her a note and I said, listen, Istanbul has a lot of cobblestones. Please make sure you bring some flat shoes. And so the first day we get there, the whole crowd, and she's there with like 10-inch pumps, and I'm like, did you not get the memo about the flat shoes? And she goes, well, I didn't know the cobblestones would be like this. And I'm thinking, well, what kind of so we had to spend the first hour shopping for shoes for her so she could actually do the tour, right? So I did a lot of shoe shopping there. And then last year, I was in Copenhagen at an academic meeting, and I was there early because I'm part of the executive, and the rest were coming later. So the same lady, I just was feeling very sort of concerned that she would make the same mistake. So I sent her a text, and she's not always the most responsive person when you message her. So I sent her a message saying her name, I won't even say her first name. I said, don't forget, Copenhagen has cobblestones as well. Please make sure you have flat shoes. So this person wrote back immediately, which is kind of unusual. And said, well, Amir, thank you. You always have good advice. Yes, I can confirm I have flat shoes. It turned out that in my hurry to text this person, the same first name was used, except the person I actually texted was the newly incoming CEO of a major pharma company who happened to be headquartered in Copenhagen, which you can guess what that is. And she'd written back as if this was a perfectly normal text to get from me. She's like, just thankful for the advice. And I thought, so I had to write back and say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. This was for another first name, But apparently the advice was just as relevant as it happened. So yes, that was about my shoe thing continues.
So the only thing I got out of this is when Marina and I go into Istanbul, we'll call you where to get the shoes.
Yes. Well, I wouldn't Istanbul has many, many great things to buy. I'm not sure shoes will be the top of the line.
But as a are you a neuroscientist or as a clinician, yes. But the psychology of shoes is got to be fascinating, right? Like, so the fact that, so the shoe is connecting you to where you're walking. It's setting you up to like, it's your condition of like formality of event, to convenience, exercise. It's like, there must be a whole, are you obsessed with it, or is it just, you just like to wear a good pair of shoes?
Are you asking Eugene or me?
You.
Oh, I'm not obsessed with shoes at all.
No.
It was not an area of neuroscience I'm into. So I, as I said earlier, I know a little about everything. I'm in no way obsessed with shoes. I will admit, I do have more shoes than the average person, but that's not an obsession at all. I have many other things that I'm obsessed about. Shoe tech being one of them. Shoes, not really. I mean, I have more than most people, but no, it's not an obsession.
So I mean, you can look at. I mean, there's a lot of gait measurement devices now in shoes. I actually saw. Speaking of Japan, that's where I first saw a lot of these devices.
Yeah, you want to be like, when you go into the line at the airport, you want to be behind a Japanese businessman, because they'll just be able to slip their shoe off before they go through the terminal.
Perfect
No,
planning.
Jim,
perfect
what you
planning.
really want to do be in the club that has its own TSA line, so you don't even have to go the normal line, right? That's
Right.
Oh, look
I thought
at
this
this
was going to be a
fancy
shoe
guy.
You were telling
Why-
me this is going to be a shoe intervention. This is going to be a shoe intervention.
I mean,
Psychological.
I will bring Marina in on that. I should have brought her in on this conversation, because
Yes.
I know nothing about it. I just know the ones with the red soles are good. That's
Okay,
All I know is
move on from
you
shoes.
told me,
I know.
When you told me, Eugene, that your wife has agreed she's buying no more shoes, right? Officially.
No. So she didn't agree to that. As I'm for the first time ever in the unpacking process, because usually I was traveling for some company, right? Here we're running a startup together. I'm home, and I'm actually helping unpack everything. So we realized two things: there's way too many shoes that she has, and way too many spices. She agreed to the spice, but not the shoes. So.
That's why I figured. I didn't think she would ever tell you she's got enough shoes.
But let's bring it back to pharma.
Yeah, well, I want to make sure that we cover the big news, though, that we were delaying the 6 months of delays of me coming on the broadcast. There was a reason, so maybe we should cover that briefly before we go back to travel.
Yeah, there's like 4 letters. DTRA. So let's talk. There's a lot of excitement. I know I tagged a bunch of people, so I'm sure that added to your influx of emails and tags. But yeah, tell us.
Sure. So we officially last week, which is why we're doing this this week, we officially launched DTRA at DTRA.org, which stands for Decentralized Clinical Trials and Research Alliance, which is a non-profit 501(c) comprised of member companies and organizations. So we have pharma, CROs, service companies, FDA, patient advocacy groups, lots of tech companies. So it really crosses the whole, and there's more categories, I don't go on forever. It really is a multi-stakeholder group that is really focused on how do we really accelerate the adoption, where appropriate, of decentralized methodologies, not just in clinical trials, but really research. And what's been amazing to us is we've been working on this for a while before the pandemic, because I think pre-2020, everyone was thinking it's the new thing, right? It's the future thing. But like everything else in pharma, there was a lot of people working on actual products and supply, and pharma was doing pilots as usual, right?
Not enough demand.
So it was, right. So they just was very slow. Clearly the upsides and the advantages were clear, right? But because of our normal conservatism, sometimes appropriately, it really had not pushed as much. So we have been thinking about it since last year, and it started because the last 3 or 4 years, we've had sessions on decentralized research at CNS Summit, and pretty much all the usual companies that are really major in that space were all there at these sessions. And because Summit's run the way it is, which is non-promotional and kind of very serious about these things, people said, hey, we really need to have a meeting just on decentralized. Can you do a meeting, Amir? And I explained to them, Summit really was an accident. It's not my day job. I really do not want to be starting new meetings. This is not what I do for a living. So I was really not interested in starting new meetings. I said, but you know what? I mean, I truly believe, looking at where we are now with decentralized, is where we are with some other things, where really there is no central body to help us, be a trusted source of information. Think about, how do you even define things? At the moment, there's a lot of confusion over how you even define certain things within decentralized. And there's many barriers to adoption that we have to think about. So we worked on this based on the idea that we think something like that should exist. And when we went around asking people, everyone said, this is a no-brainer, someone should do it. And I'm always the idiot that when no one else does it, I just do it.
Oh, you said it before. If something doesn't exist, I go create it. So you just follow your own rule.
So the need clearly was there. We actually were going to have an in-person meeting earlier in the year. I actually flew to Boston, look at some hotels. Some of the pharma companies were willing to host it. Then COVID hit. And suddenly we had this forced innovation where it became very clear that this is really the time is now, right? So then we basically, oh yes, thank you. And can I just say, now that I've paid a fine, I'm happy to pay a second one. I believe, am I not the first guest when we've had the light in front of us in the tunnel, that we actually have friends of mine that I know have had the vaccine. So I would like to celebrate for a minute and just say,
yes.
Yeah, so I'm happy to represent the optimism of the light at the end of the tunnel from science. So, well,
yes, we absolutely have to drink to that. And I know your partner in crime, the DTRA, Craig very vocal,
yes,
pushing that the scientists are doing everything possible. And it's
absolutely.
amazing.
And so thank you, because I was actually, my notes I had, we'll talk about Craig as well, and so a little bit more about DTRA, but I was willing to interrupt the DTRA story just for the vaccine. I think is worth it.
100%.
So basically we decided when the pandemic hit that we really need to accelerate this. So we spent this year really onboarding people. So we launched last week with just under 60 entities, which really for an organization that hasn't really launched yet, that was pretty amazing to have 60 before launch. I'm happy and kind of overwhelmed to say the first day it was launched, we had 140 inbound requests to join. And as of last I saw this morning, it's almost 400, which is, well, I'm not sure all of them will meet criteria, but the inbound has been unbelievable, that how many people are really interested to join, and they understand that we're doing, this is needed, we're doing it for the right reasons. And I'm very lucky that my co-convener is Craig Lipset, which everybody knows has really been leading specifically decentralized trials since his time at Pfizer, going back literally decades. So I think he's a perfect person to be co-leading this with me. And we've really, between us, I think we know pretty much everyone within, the ecosystem. And as you said, we've been advocates for it for a long time. So I think it's natural for us to really bring people together. When we did have our first leadership council meeting last Friday, it went extremely well considering, how many diverse stakeholders we have. And we've spent most of this year actually interviewing them and doing surveys to understand what our priorities should be. And what was interesting was you could imagine that perhaps patient groups, FDA, pharma companies would have very different priorities. Interestingly, having done all those interviews, and I saw most of them, we are amazed how much alignment there is around what they see as kind of immediate needs. And we've actually discussed those. The Leadership Council will announce them soon, what our priorities areas are. And I'm actually very excited by the fact that people seem really keen to work together on this. So, it just feels like the first days of CNS Summit where people understood the sort of mission and really wanted to help. So the inbound has been amazing. And so many people have, even who are not in companies, have reached out and said, look, maybe I don't have a job today, or maybe my company's in there, but I want to help. There's so many individuals too who are really just trying to donate their expertise and time. So I'm very excited about it. So,
and Amir, just for me, just break it down a little bit. Like, so when you say like these patient groups and the, these organizations, like what would be a project or, that you would oversee, or
what's the goal?
Right. Sure. So it's a couple of things. One of the common questions actually we get asked, it was very interesting starting it, because you can imagine when we go to companies and say, would you like to be in? The two questions were, who else is in and what are your priorities? And our answer was, we aren't going to tell you who else is in, and our priorities are not set yet because we're going to ask you to tell us what our priorities are. So it was kind of an interesting pitch deck, right? So luckily people kind of were okay with that. In terms of what we're going to do, those priorities are just being voted on as we speak, actually, but I can give you some ideas. First of all, there are many other great organizations that are in the space. So Transcelerate, Dime, City, IMI in Europe. There are many groups, the American Telemedicine Association. They're groups that have a very broader remit, that have work groups on aspects of decentralized methodologies. And we've actually proactively been reaching out to all those groups. So we see them as sister organizations, and we're very happy to see them invest in anything within this area. So we see ourselves as kind of the central clearinghouse of all information around decentralized. So maybe that some of these other groups will actually spend quite a bit of resources on a particular initiative. That means that DTRA doesn't have to do that, right? And we can amplify what they've produced. So that's great. So we see that as a real network of organizations, even within, you know, a pharma and life industry, that will work with each other. So we definitely see them as, you know, brothers in arms in terms of what we do. In terms of what we will specifically do, again, I would say that I don't want to speak for the Leadership Council, but one can imagine things like, you know, definitions, right? Removing barriers. So right now, although temporarily telemedicine pure might be able to practice beyond their own state in the US, for example, that may not last forever, right? That's only a temporary thing. Also, in traditional trials, you know, I've spent 2 decades running global clinical trials. Everything I did was in 60 countries. That infrastructure is not available to us right now in terms of decentralized, right? There's many, many barriers to running global decentralized trials. And you can break that down into many, many categories. So you can imagine those are many topics that we could be working on. Education, just explain to people, you know, how can they actually get into it? So if you think of pharma companies, there's a whole range, there always is, of early adopters, right? People who watch to see what others do. And a lot of it will be actually learning from each other. We've done this. I will tell you, if you ever look at a video from Summit from 2 years ago, the opening quote from someone is, people in pharma say it can't be done till they come to Summit and see other people already doing it, right? So I think one of the biggest things we can do is share knowledge of what's possible and what people have done in regulatory trials, so that the internal conservatism that people have, sometimes appropriately, they just don't know whether this is something they can do. Just being able to share that information between the stakeholders will be a huge win.
But if you were to explain to, say, someone from finance that was joining, you know, a health technology company and they were coming in, what is a decentralized trial? Like, what is that?
Absolutely. So all
30-second pitch. Let's hear Amir do a 30-second pitch.
I haven't actually developed it, so we don't have a pitch.
I'm kidding.
But if you were asking what is a layman's kind of explanation of decentralized trial, right? Let me just go back and give you a bit of history. One good thing about having a central body in some ways is there is some order to the chaos eventually. So nobody called it decentralized trials till very recently. Why was that? It was called virtual trials, remote trials, right? The reason suddenly this decentralized became the thing to say was FDA came up with a guidance that said our preferred terminology is decentralized, because virtual trials actually have a very specific meaning in very early phase trials. That means something completely different. So they wanted clarity around that. So that's just an example where if everyone can call it the same thing, it's actually helpful. We still need more work on that. There's hybrid trials. So all those things that we will work on, making sure people have a common understanding. But in terms of what is it for a lay person, is the only thing it means is that unlike at the moment in traditional trials, where as a patient, you're forced to go to a clinical trial site at every visit, right? And if you don't have access geographically, you know, you don't have the means to go and do that, you cannot be in a clinical trial. All it means is we're allowing the ability for patients to ideally choose, even per visit, do I want to go into the clinic today? You know, is that possible for me? Or can I do all this at home? Or a hybrid version will be that, like some clinic visits, some virtual. The other one would be completely decentralized, and, you know, where you never come into a clinic at all. I don't believe we're going to dramatically change that everything's suddenly going to become remote. That's not true, right? I will tell you right now, I can do my best to do a physical exam on you right now, Jim, as a physician. The fact that you're on Zoom, that's not optimal, right? Me not being in your room with you, I can't truly say I can do a physical exam on you. There's many things that technology is not going to solve. So it will be many methodologies. It could be a nurse or a physician coming to your house to do something, or take your blood at home, right? So all it really means to me is the ability to allow patients to have better access, diverse patient groups that have not had access before, to really open up that ability to actually have patients come in who traditionally could not have come into those trials, make it more convenient for them, but also not just for convenience of patients and more accessibility. before, what would happen? You would come in and you'd be assessed in the clinical trial site once a week. Okay, let's take my area of neuroscience. Okay, although I've done trials across many indications. Within neuroscience, what do? You ask someone how they felt for the last week in a questionnaire. Now, you tell me, Jim, could you tell me how depressed you've been in the last week? Well, there's been 7 distinct days, right? Were you really depressed Monday morning and feel really good Wednesday?
All I know is Wednesdays is my
good.
day.
Yes, exactly. But you know what? If you're in a depression trial and you're being assessed, you're going to get 1 item rating for the whole week, right? And which is, when you think about it, is a tiny fraction of your week that you kind of, and you're not going to remember what you ate this morning even. So if you think about what remote methodologies will allow us to do is, as we know, look, I'll show you. The other day I was showing people a couple of weeks ago, I'll take it off. I had the Amazon Halo, which, by the way, this week is now available to everyone. Have you guys got it?
I signed up for it when I was in US, but I haven't.
Actually, it's interesting.
Malik, right? Is it?
Yeah, Malik is there. That's right. Yeah.
Right. So someone he's involved, I believe. So someone noticed on my arm the other day on the Zoom, and they said, "What is that?" So it's the Halo. But what's interesting is, this thing is actually very good for sleep. It has very detailed sleep stuff. Analyzes your voice. It will tell me how agitated or calm I was during this hour. How I felt.
I can't wait for that data.
Yeah. Then if you take, talking of nakedness, if you take your picture, actually it will upload to the Amazon. This is the most intrusive part. You take pictures of yourself without clothes on, you send it to the Amazon, believe it or not, cloud. They promise they will delete it afterwards, and they will measure your BMI more accurately than a scale they claim, right? But my point here being that with many devices, we'll be able to track patients all week without having to ask them just today, how were you? We know how much they walked. We know what their gait was like. So it's not just about convenience or access. I believe it will give us far more information about patients in clinical trials, which has good and bad.
Will help. Yeah, will help the patients themselves.
It's better data. So
the organization, as I see it, so the organization,
by the way, I'm the bad guy timing. Yes. Actually, I can see the clock behind you, Jim, too.
Yeah, that's right. Oh yeah. It's all different times.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so the organization is going to advocate for better structured and more collaborative spirit around the idea of leveraging all this phenomenal technology and remoteness and virtualization and modernizing the approach to trial
and ultimately inclusion then, right? Because if previously even geographic exclusion, now in theory there isn't.
But we have to develop that infrastructure, right? So when are we going to claim that we're there yet, right? I think there's 3 things I'll mention. We already have the technology to do many things. Technology has never been the barrier. Culture has been. So one of our goals is to really develop that culture, just we have for Summit, to really think about collaboration, right? And then thirdly, the other thing I would say is many people keep asking, does this mean you won't have clinical trial sites? We actually have clinical trial networks in DTRA already. And the reason is we absolutely don't believe the sites are going away. Their model, just like for everyone else, will evolve. Many of the remote assessments will be actually done by site staff at the site. So just because you're assessing someone remotely does not mean that won't be, because those are actually the clinicians who will ultimately be treating the patients when in the clinic, right, after the drug is approved. So the way we look at it is that how do we as a whole ecosystem really think about how to optimize it for patients, for the sites, and ultimately how do we make it more efficient for pharma too, clearly.
Phenomenal.
Great.
Wowzers. So I think, Amir, you win. I think this will be, and I'm talking slowly on purpose because I think it's going to be the longest episode ever that everybody must listen to. So lastly, maybe you can say where you can be found for DTRA, like.
Absolutely. So DTRA is at dtra.org. CNS Summit is at cnssummit.org. And we're very responsive. Anyone has questions, we're happy to do that. And my Twitter handle is Kalali. It's more interesting than my LinkedIn.
Also at Shoe Lover. No.
Yeah, no, that's the. It's funny. That is not my moniker so far. But what I would say is, that's funny. What I will say is, you want some travel tips? Definitely look at my Twitter timeline. There's some, but Jim, I'll tell you the story later about the Dublin exploits and the FBI.
Definitely. Well, congrats on DTRA. That sounds phenomenal. And I've heard over the years, I wanted to go to CNS Summit and I just didn't happen, but I heard fantastic feedback. Lots of my
I appreciate that.
health peeps.
Yeah, no, definitely. We have fun there. And thank you for doing this, by the way. I've watched every episode. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. Really enjoyed it.
No, thanks.
Thank you very much. It was awesome to have you. And for all of the listeners and viewers, just hit that subscribe button. We're hitting all kinds of crazy numbers, Jim.
Yeah,
going into 2021.
Oh, after this week, I mean, the DTRA folks will come in. Yeah,
I know. Send all the 400 in the footer with the link to this episode. There you go.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. Take care.
Cheers.